Great to be back with you, Mike.
Well, let's get straight on with the heroes of the hour, continuing to be the White Helmets. Well, it's a bit unfortunate, Patrick, that, what has happened? The Syrian government making too much, or Syrian army making too much progress in the southern part of Syria. We've had to see a significant number of White Helmets being some kind of emergency evacuation, I suppose is what you say. Well, let's have a look and see what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say, because these people have come out through Israel. He said that Donald Trump had been in touch asking for help in getting these people moved out of southern Syria. These are the people who are saving so many hundreds of thousands of lives. And so Mr. Netanyahu approved their passage through Israel. And currently they're in the hands of the UNHCR. We'll come on to that in a second. Now, there's lots of stuff in the mainstream media about this today and yesterday. But Vanessa Beeley was speaking to some people earlier on about this. She said that she'd just done an interview on Al Mayadeen, and this is what she learned from the other guests in Damascus and Jordan about the White Helmet exodus from southern Syria. Out of the alleged 800 White Helmets who were given exceptional assistance by Israel, only 442 have actually arrived in the camps in Jordan. According to intelligence on the ground, reality is that more than 3,000 exceptional refugees have actually transitioned into Israel. And she's asking, does this mean that more than 2,500 were possibly Israeli affiliates and proxies who have been repatriated to Israel, EU special forces who will return home from Israel, or Gulf state intelligence military entities who will also return home from Israel without needing to transfer to Jordan? That's a good question. She says that nationalities involved are said to be UAE, Qatar and Saudi. Most were not Syrian. Also these exceptional refugees would not accept amnesty and be evacuated to the north, as this would mean that they would have to undergo inspection of their equipment and nationality, which would expose the regime change coalition states who were controlling them. And she's saying that of the 442 who have arrived in Jordan, Germany is committed to taking 50. Canada has suggested that it will take 250. So how many will come to France and the UK? And she's saying that the guests on the program with her were Dr. Turki Hassan from Damascus and Dr. Hayat Atayef from Jordan. So that's what Vanessa has discovered is the latest information on this. Now, as Moon of Alabama was pointing out today, because lots of the commentary that's running around the Twitter sphere and the mainstream media is that these people were brought to Israel. But Moon of Alabama here making the point, of course, that it was the United Nations that managed the evacuation, not Israel. And that's indeed what Netanyahu said. He had authorized for them to be transferred through Israel. Then yesterday, of course, there's this joint statement from Penny Mordaunt and Jeremy Hunt, the new Foreign Secretary of State. The statement, well, just read the statement in total, because it's worth reading the whole thing. It says, following a joint diplomatic effort by the UK and international partners, a group of White Helmet volunteers from southern Syria and their families have been able to leave Syria for safety. They are now being assisted by the UNHCR in Jordan pending international resettlement. The White Helmets, she said, have saved over 115,000 lives during the Syrian conflict at great risk to their own. Many White Helmet volunteers have also been killed while doing their work, trying to rescue civilians trapped in bombarded buildings or providing first aid to injured civilians. White Helmets have been the target of attacks, and due to their high profile, we judged that in these particular circumstances, the volunteers required immediate protection. We therefore took steps with the aim of affording that protection to as many of the volunteers and their families as possible. We pay tribute to the brave and selfless work that the White Helmets volunteers have done to save Syrians on all sides of the conflict. Well, that's very interesting. That's what the Foreign Office and the Department for International Development had to say on this. Peter Ford, the former ambassador to Syria for the United Kingdom, had slightly different take on this. So he made some comments on that statement from Penny Mordaunt and Jeremy Hunt. And he said the government statement issued on the 22nd of July below contains two blatant lies. The White Helmets most definitely have not assisted all sides of the conflict. From their founding in Turkey in 2013 by James Le Mesurier, a former employee of MI5, they have only ever operated in rebel-held areas. Syrian government-controlled areas have the Real Syrian Civil Defense and Syrian Red Crescent. The White Helmets' appropriation of the title Syrian Civil Defense is typical of the misleading cloud of disinformation surrounding this media-savvy, pampered organisation. Secondly, the White Helmets are not volunteers. However, often this misleading term is applied to them. They are doing jobs for which they're paid by Western governments. That's the UK, the US, Canada, Germany, Netherlands and New Zealand. They received £38 million from the UK up to March 2018. They have a press department 150 strong, bigger than that for the whole of the UK ambulance service. Their claims of saving over 115,000 lives have never been verified. The co-location of their offices with jihadi operation centres, on the other hand, has been well documented. Apparently the government are lying because they're nervous of being accused of importing into this country scores of dangerous migrants who have many times been reported to be associating with extremists. The government transparently needs to whitewash them. The White Helmets' dramatic exfiltration leaves many questions unanswered. Why was it deemed necessary to evacuate this particular group in the south when other groups of White Helmets simply got on the buses to northern Syria when military operations concluded in Aleppo, eastern Ghouta and elsewhere, and when similar exodus by bus has been arranged for rebels in Daraa? Why should White Helmets be considered to be more at risk than combatants, many of whom have either reconciled or been bussed out? In the demonology of the government side, the White Helmets are not seen as worse than other jihadis. Might the British government have been afraid of this particular group being caught and interrogated, revealing perhaps the truth about alleged chemical weapons incidents? Will they now be foisted onto poorer areas of the UK already struggling to absorb migrants, or will they go to places like Esher and Carshalton? Will local councils be informed about the backgrounds of these fugitives? Will local councils be given extra resources to absorb them and cope with resulting security needs, bearing in mind that Raed Saleh, the leader of the White Helmets, was refused a visa to the US in 2016. So those are Peter Ford's comments and questions, and I think that covers it all very nicely.
It does. So we've identified, Mike, 4 lies told by Penny Mordaunt in that joint statement with Jeremy Hunt. 1, they are not volunteers, the White Helmets. That's a fact. They're paid. In fact, if you look at what they're paid, although it might seem a pittance to the average Briton or European at $150 or $200 a month, bear in mind a Syrian army soldier will make around $50 a month. You can go ahead and check those figures if you'd like. If you want to look at the average national salary for a Syrian professional of a medium grade, or a teacher, or a college lecturer, you're going to find it's right around the same exact level as what the White Helmet volunteers are being paid. That's the first lie. The second lie is that they are helping civilians on all sides of the conflict. That's patently false. The White Helmets only operate in terrorist-held areas exclusively, and of their membership happen to fall into one exclusive demographic, which is male, Sunni, and it seems Salafist, so more on the sort of extremist or Islamist side. 100% Sunni, male, Muslim, and leaning, I would say, more than average on Salafist side. The third lie is that they have saved 115,000 lives. Now, I can't prove that they haven't, but they can't prove that they have. There is not one single bit of documentation. We have not seen one single interview. Imagine, Mike, the hours of films produced by this group in their film production roadshow. Not one interview of a survivor, someone who's been rescued by the White Helmets. Not one. Not one, Mike. And so they've saved 115,000 lives. If you do the math, they were founded and became active in late 2013. That's a pretty heavy daily clip of saving lives. You can go ahead and do the math at home. or in the UK column chat box, please let us know how many per day that would have been up until when they were active a few months ago. So they have no documentation, no accident reports, no reports whatsoever, names, residencies, addresses, dates, places, geolocating coordinates of when and where these lives were saved, Mike.
Well, that's very strange.
There's no data at all.
That's a very strange thing, Patrick, because apparently they send quarterly financial reports to the Foreign Office, but yet they don't have this type of data. That's
for a first responder organization, Mike. That would be the first thing I would be looking for in terms of, say, auditing. Am I getting my money's worth by plowing, collectively between the U.S., Britain, the Dutch government, the German government, the Japanese government, the New Zealand government, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking upwards of $250 million. Okay, thus far, plus all the crowdfunding money that's been poured into them and Mayday Rescue. Can we see a list or some sort of evidence? Is it maybe, I don't know, if you're listening now, the White Helmets, it's not too late to fabricate some evidence. Just put something together, make some interviews happen, do something of these 115,000 lives that you've saved, supposedly. So you'd think that a government minister would want to be able to back a statement like that. But the fourth lie, Mike, here's the fourth lie. The fourth lie is actually underpinning this whole narrative we're seeing this week. What is the fourth lie? That the White Helmets are targets of attacks. Who is targeting the White Helmets? When and where were they singled out or targeted? Or is this just something that's come out of their PR oracle? Like everything else that's come out of the White Helmets, 150-person strong public relations and media unit, as you pointed out, Mike. So major organizations, international organizations, don't have that sort of manpower for public relations, marketing, and media communication. So maybe they could tell us and provide some evidence as to how this group has been targeted. Here's the bottom line, Mike. This group could have easily gotten the bus to Idlib and walked across the border to Turkey. In fact, their base is in Turkey, not Syria. It's in Gaziantep. And that's where some of the filming is sometimes done as well of their training, and who knows what other filming is done in Turkey. So they have a base of operations there. Why couldn't they have gone there? And so is this not a cover story? How many White Helmets were actually in this? Is this a cover story for a bigger operation, which Vanessa Beeley has alluded to there, the repatriation of hundreds, in fact, maybe thousands of foreign fighters working at least under the partial military supervision or coordinating with the Israeli military, who is active on that southern front, as is the U.S. military and other NATO member states. So is that not what we're looking at? Because, Mike, in fact, many of the Syrian rebels have already surrendered or already negotiated terms of surrender or have gone through the reconciliation process. Why would the so-called first responders or search and rescue members of this great, wonderful organization, why would they not be afforded equal rights or ability to go through the same processes that armed militants have gone through, unless they themselves are not White Helmets, unless they themselves are foreign fighters, in fact, and this is a cover for a much bigger exodus or movement of foreign fighters across borders and then scatter them out into other countries. So, Mike, there's a lot to unpack here, and it seems to me like what is being advertised in the mainstream media is a fantastic bit of PR cover for something else that's actually happening.
So we have a figure of 550 a week over that 4 or 5 year period.
So they've saved 550 lives a week. Have the Syrian army actually flown that many air sorties, Mike?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's quite an interesting statistic.
Well, look, we'll come on to a bit more of this in a second. Before we leave Syria,